They told me to move my boat off my lake. That's when I realized this HOA didn't just overstep. They sprinted off a cliff. What they didn't know was that they were about to mess with the actual owner of the water they loved so much. And when I dropped the truth, let's just say their little fishing club, gone, evicted for good. It started like any other Tuesday, peaceful, sunny, and quiet. The kind of morning where the birds are chirping, the coffee tastes just right, and the lake outside glistens like a postcard. But that peace didn't last long. As I walked back from the mailbox, flipping through bills and grocery ads, I saw a formal-looking envelope, cream-colored. Stiff paper, bold print across the top. Homeowners Association violation notice. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who gets into trouble with the HOA. I live in a nice lakeside community. Quiet, beautiful, a small HOA mostly run by retirees and part-time residents who love rules, clipboards, and community bake sales. I don't cause problems. I don't throw wild parties. I don't even leave my trash can out past pickup day. I keep to myself. I wave politely. I rake my leaves. So getting a violation notice? It made 0 sense. I opened it up and the first sentence nearly made me laugh. You are in violation of HOA regulations. Your boat, currently docked at the north end of Lake Winston, must be removed within 7 days or face daily fines of $50. I stared at it for a moment thinking, wait, what? They were referring to my boat, a small, quiet fishing boat that's been tied to my personal dock for years. Same spot, same setup, never moved, never an issue. The boat's not flashy. It's not falling apart. It doesn't leak oil or make noise. It just sits there, peacefully bobbing at the edge of my property. In fact, several of my neighbors have complimented it, even borrowed it on occasion. And now it was a violation? At first I thought maybe it was a mistake, a mix-up in lot numbers or addresses. Surely no one would just invent a problem out of thin air, right? But then I read further. The letter claimed my boat was occupying shared dock space. It also cited some obscure rule about unsightly equipment, disrupting community aesthetics. What a joke. That's when I knew this wasn't about a boat. This was about control. Someone on the HOA board had gotten a little too power-happy and decided I was the next target. So I made a decision right then and there. I was going to the next HOA meeting. Not to argue, not to plead, just to listen and figure out exactly who thought they had the right to tell me what to do with something I owned. And as I would soon learn, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I walked into that meeting calm, collected, and honestly curious. It was held in the community clubhouse, the kind with folding chairs, lukewarm coffee, and that distinct smell of entitlement in the air. I found a seat in the back, just observing as they went through their usual agenda. Lawn violations, fence paint colors, someone's dog barking too much, the usual HOA micromanagement checklist. Then it was my turn. The president of the HOA, a guy named Carl, looked up from his clipboard with that tight-lipped, practiced smile. He was one of those people who carries a clipboard everywhere, as if being in charge of neighborhood garbage bins made him a military general. He cleared his throat and said, "We've received multiple complaints. Your boat is an eyesore and it's occupying shared dock space. It must be removed within the deadline we outlined." I blinked. "Shared, Carl? That's my dock." He raised an eyebrow and gave a chuckle. Not a friendly one, more like a condescending snort. "Well, technically," he said, with the smug confidence of a man who watched one YouTube video on HOA bylaws, "the lake and all access points are managed by the HOA. It's all in the covenants." I paused, looked around the room. Most of the board members nodded along, clearly unaware they were all about to be hit with a dose of reality. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just smiled, because in that moment I realized something incredibly important. Carl had no idea who he was talking to. See, long before most of these people moved in, before the HOA even existed in its current form, I had bought the land at the northern edge of Lake Winston. Not just the land, the water rights too. It was a unique sale. When the original developer was cashing out, I purchased a sizable piece of the lake and everything connected to it. The deed includes water access, shoreline, and even exclusive dock usage. It's all there, signed, sealed, legally recorded. So while the HOA was busy hosting fishing tournaments, launching kayaks, and bragging about their lake in newsletters, they were actually doing all that on my property, every single time. They didn't own the lake. I did. And now that Carl had opened this can of worms, it was time to let them stew in the mess they didn't even know they made. I went home from that HOA meeting without saying much. I didn't need to. Carl and his clipboard. Brigade had just written a check their legal authority couldn't cash that night. I sat down at my desk and pulled out the folder I hadn't looked at in years. Thick manila envelope, dusty from sitting in storage, but inside, pure gold. I laid everything out. The land title that clearly marked the northern shoreline of Lake Winston as mine. The survey maps showing the property lines extending into the lake. And most importantly, the water rights documentation, signed by the original developer, notarized and filed with the county. For added effect, I printed out the email from the developer, the one that confirmed in plain English that the HOA had no jurisdiction over my section of the lake. Once I had everything in order, I took a deep breath and started typing. My letter to the HOA was polite, professional, but unmistakably firm. To the board of the Lake Winston Homeowners Association, please be advised that I am the legal owner of the northern portion of Lake Winston, including the dock and surrounding water area currently in question. As such, I am not subject to HOA regulations regarding this property. Furthermore, your fishing club and other organized activities, which have routinely used this portion of the lake without my knowledge or permission, constitute unauthorized use of private property. Effective immediately, access is revoked. Please find attached legal documentation supporting these facts, including my deed, water rights paperwork, and official surveys. Just for good measure, I highlighted the most critical sections, bolded the parcel numbers, underlined the phrases like exclusive ownership, and not under HOA jurisdiction. I didn't need a lawyer, not yet anyway. I just needed them to read. I printed the letter, attached the documents, and dropped it in their little white HOA mailbox with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Then, I waited. I didn't have to wait long. Less than 24 hours later, my inbox pinged. It was an email from Carl, the subject line, urgent clarification needed regarding lake ownership. Yeah, Carl. Now you want to talk. The clock had officially started ticking, and the HOA was about to get a very real education in who actually ran things around here. The subject line read, urgent, misunderstanding regarding lake use. Carl opened with, we regret any confusion. It appears there may have been a misunderstanding regarding property lines and access rights. Then came the excuses. They weren't aware of the unique deed arrangement. They never intended to cause offense. And of course, they hope we can come to an amicable agreement moving forward. Nice try. But no, too late. This wasn't a one-time slip-up. This was years of entitlement. Fishing tournaments, kayak races, barbecues, even fireworks, all hosted on my property without a second thought. So that weekend, I made it official. First, I put up bright red no, trespassing signs around the perimeter of my section of the lake. Every access point from the trails and walking paths was clearly marked. Then I installed a lockable gate on my dock, with a motion sensor light and camera, nothing too aggressive, just enough to make it clear I was serious. And for legal backup, I visited the county office and filed a formal notice of property misuse, just in case the HOA decided to keep pushing their luck. I even had a local sheriff stop by to review the documentation and confirm I had every right to enforce my boundaries. Within days, word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. The HOA had to issue an emergency bulletin. All organized events involving Lake Winston's northern shoreline are hereby suspended until further notice. Translation? The fishing club was shut down, permanently. No more meetups. No more tournaments. No more summer fun on what they once called our lake. And the best part? The backlash wasn't aimed at me. It was squarely focused on the board. Residents were furious. They felt lied to. Many of them had joined the HOA or moved into the community, specifically because of the lake access. Now that access was gone, because Carl and company couldn't do a basic deed check. Within a month, Carl resigned as HOA president for personal reasons. But we all knew why. His little clipboard empire had crumbled. And me? I went back to fishing off my dock, enjoying the peaceful, quiet lake I had owned all along, this time with 0 uninvited guests. Rules mean nothing without respect. And power, real power, should come with responsibility, not arrogance. The problem with Carl and his little HOA squad wasn't just their rules. It was their attitude. They didn't ask questions. They didn't check facts. They just assumed they had authority. Assumed everyone else would fall in line. And assumed I was just another quiet neighbor they could push around. Well, surprise. That boat they wanted gone? Mine. The dock they tried to regulate? Also mine. And the section of Lake Winston they'd been using for years. Like it was some kind of public park? Yeah, mine too. I didn't kick them off the lake out of spite. I didn't throw up fences or gates because I enjoy conflict. I did it because they tried to force their will on something they never had a claim to in the first place. And honestly, they needed that wake-up call. This wasn't about a fishing tournament. It was about respect, or the lack of it. You don't threaten people with fines, accuse them of violations, and talk down to them when you haven't even done the basic homework to understand what you're dealing with. What's funny is, if Carl had just knocked on my door and asked, we probably could have worked something out. I might have let the fishing club keep using the lake. But instead, he came at me with legal threats and HOA flexing. And when you do that, well, you'd better be sure you actually have the legal ground to stand on. Because sometimes, the person you're trying to boss around doesn't just own the dock. They own the whole lake. And now, the neighborhood knows. Like, share, and subscribe. If you love this story of quiet power and well-earned revenge, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that prove one thing. Sometimes the best way to win is just to own the whole situation, literally. See you in the next one.